All right, good to go?
Yep.
All right, thank you. All right, good morning, guys. Okay, rainy Saturday out there. Okay, not much else to do, so listen to some history here. Okay, but I want to appreciate what you guys are doing too. You guys are listening to these things. I didn't even know you could track the number of people that listen to these things, and at the end of the day, I found out that most of you are listening to it, and I really appreciate it. It just occurred to me, I left some of my notes upstairs, but I kind of remember what I wanted to say to you. All right, I'll do a little marketing here. This is my Gettysburg Hawaiian t-shirt, Hawaiian shirt, okay? And marketing means that I'm going to, I'll be teaching in the fall on the same date and time, okay? Same day and time that World War II class was, Tuesdays at 12:30, course in the American Civil War. That's the one that Dr. Wedding used to have. He gave it to me, okay, all right, and I'll be teaching that too. So love to see you there. I know the registration's opened up, okay, all right. Hopefully you might find it worthwhile joining in. There was one thing, I forget what it is now, okay, but that was the main thing. All right, anyway, I want to start off today with two things. First of all, okay, I don't know if you've got your masks for the COVID-19, but here's mine. Passing these out in Monmouth County. Not really. This is a World War II gas mask, a Russian gas mask, all right? World War II vintage, okay, all right? I can't put it on, it's just too tight, okay? But at any rate, that's what it is. That's what they wore. I don't know what's in this can, okay? So anyway, that's my mask. One of my kids dared me to go into Acme with it. All right, anyway, all right. Now, I do want to start off with something else that I kind of alluded to earlier on. I talked about innovations in the fleets going across the Pacific. They called them the fleet trains, the supply fleets that would resupply the task forces out at sea and that sort of thing. Okay. The other thing I talked about was the fire control teams on board these ships that were designed by the New York and Boston fire departments. Okay, firemen from those units, and that kept saved a lot of American lives. There's a third innovation, and this never existed before World War II, okay? An admiral, okay, what was his name? Benteen, something like that, okay? All right, had suggested the the establishment of construction battalions. So yeah, the Navy bought into it, and by 1942, we have established now, all right, these construction battalions. Look at the words, construction battalions, CB. This is the origin of the famous CBs in World War II. And how important is it? I don't know if I've gave this before or not, but later on, after the war was over, Bull Halsey was asked, what are the key things that won the war in the Pacific? He said one was American submarines, another was the carrier planes, a third one was radar, and the fourth one was bulldozers. Okay, all right? These CBs will end up building $11 billion worth of bases. 250,000 men, okay, serve in this unit between the ages of 18 and 50. Technically, although some 60-year-olds got in there too, the pay was the best among all the armed services. All right, these guys were welders, carpenters, electricians, pipe fitters. All right, and they were organized so 500 specialized units. So whatever you needed on a particular island to build an air base, bam, in go the CBs. We're going to see today that during the fighting on Iwo Jima, all right, the CBs are going to be on there while the battle's still being fought, rebuilding those airfields on Iwo Jima. Okay, the CBs are another innovation, and they're still around today. One of my students was a former CB, and a surprised thing he gave me one of the patches from the construction battalion he was in. Okay, and I have it up in the museum in the library. Okay, so at any rate, where are we now? Okay, we're going to wrap up the war in the Pacific today with the leaving us with the question of whether the dropping the atomic bomb was the right thing to do or not. That's next week. Next week's lecture is Humanity on Trial. It's going to include that and other things as well. The Holocaust, the treatment of the Nisei, whether FDR knew about the attack on Pearl Harbor. All right, but what I want to focus on mainly today is two things, okay? The Battle of Iwo Jima and the Battle of Okinawa. So now into 1945, okay, all right? The last battles of the Pacific War. And one thing to start it off with is Iwo Jima. Now, Iwo Jima is this is sacred ground to the United States Marine Corps. I'm going to read you a passage from the book Flags of Our Fathers by James Bradley. He wrote this. His father fought there. He wrote this. I spoke of the battle. It ground on for 36 days. It claimed 25,851 U.S. casualties. Think back to Okinawa. We had about 5,000 or less, and that was considered a bloody battle. Each island got worse as they approached Japan, okay? Nearly 7,000 dead, 22,000 defenders fought to their deaths. It was America's most heroic battle. More medals of valor were awarded on Iwo Jima than any other battle in the history of the United States. To put that in perspective, the Marines were awarded 84 medals of honor in World War II. Over 4 years, that was 22 a year, about 2 a month. But in just 1 month of fighting on this volcanic rock sand island, they were awarded 27 medals of honor, 1/3 of their accumulated total. This is a bloodbath, okay? It's the only island where America took more casualties than the Japanese did who were defending it. And that is large part due to a guy named Kurabayashi. We're going to be talking about him in just a few minutes here. Well, where are they? You always need your maps in front of you, okay? All right, hopefully you've still got that and you can refer to it. You see it's about 750 miles from Japan. Now the Marianas were about 1,250 miles from Japan. And the big B-29s would take off from those airports that the Seabees built, okay? Tinian was the largest airport in the world, okay, by 1945. And they would have to fly directly over Iwo Jima. Now, 2 things happen at that point. 1, they get intercepted by fighter planes. 2, okay, advance warning from the radar and radio stations there would notify Tokyo there's another flight of B-17s coming in. That involved George H.W. Bush. In the very beginning of the course, I told you about this story where he got shot down over a neighboring island, Chichijima. He was sent there to take out the radio tower, all right? So these islands, the Bonin Islands, which are actually part of Japan's home islands. This is Japanese territory. Not a lot of civilian population there, though. Frankly, it was just a desolate, pork chop shaped island. At any rate, coming back now. Suppose those B-29s are shot up, crippled. Okay, they had an aileron shot out, whatever it might be. Okay, all right, stabilizer. All right, they may have to ditch in the Pacific. On the course of the battle, as it's being fought beginning in February and into April of March of 1945, one B-17 and one B-29 crippled is going to land on the island amid the combat. Okay, it can't make it all the way back to the Marianas. So it is important. There are those who suggest that maybe it shouldn't have been taken. Tell that to the 22,000 airmen whose lives were saved by being able to make emergency landings on Iwo Jima. At one point, Iwo Jima's airports, and they will have 3 of them on their airstrips, okay, had 300 B-29s sitting on it. Okay, it wasn't their main base of operation. These are crippled planes that can't make it back. So it is valuable. Don't tell it to the Marines that it's not valuable. You know about the Marine Monument in Washington, D.C., okay, all right? That Marine Monument was the raising of the flag on Mount Suribachi on the 5th day after the invasion. All right, and I got to show you something. This is cool. I was going to bring this into class and show you when I was due to teach this, but obviously I don't see anymore. Okay, this is kind of interesting. Okay, it's a little stand-up of the Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima. If you look carefully in the bottom, you see a little vial there. It's actually got sand from Iwo Jima. It's kind of just a gitchy little thing that I like to have. Okay, anyway. All right, souvenirs. Whether it's real sand or not, I don't know, but I'm gullible. You tell me that, I'll believe it. Okay, I got portions of the Berlin Wall. Okay, yeah, it could be somebody's sidewalk. But anyway, all right, let's talk about this battle now and things like this. Okay, who is this guy Kurabayashi? Tadamichi Kurabayashi. All right, he is of the old samurai warrior class and believes in the samurai ethic. Okay, all right. He was actually part of the Imperial Palace Guard for Emperor Hirohito in his early days. He also served as in the Kwantung Army and the naval attaché, okay, in Washington. So this guy was really impressive. Every bit as impressive in some ways as some of the other Japanese admirals, such as Yamamoto and things like this. He's a general, okay. He arrived in the summer of 1944, began to prepare the defenses. He could have gone one of 2 directions. Traditionally, you could attack the American invasion fleet on the beaches and drive them back into the sea. Well, that had been tried and done, and it didn't work. All right. This time, what he's going to do is allow those Marines to land, get those beaches clogged, and then open up with everything he's got. Okay. He begins to develop the defensive systems here. 17 miles of tunnels underneath the volcanic rock, right? Often 3 deep underground. 750 pillboxes and bunkers. Okay, 1,500 underground rooms. Every square inch of every beach on this island. Okay, it's not that big. It's basically 8 square miles. Okay, right? Has 2 airstrips and a third one under construction, as I kind of alluded to before. All right. This thing is under, every square inch was under enfilade fire. It was covered by machine gun and mortar fire from some position. Well, all right, he's going to allow them to land and attack them when they're crowded on the beaches. All right, the Marines grossly underestimate this. They think the conquest of the island, not that big. It's going to take 3 days. That's it. It's going to take 36 days. Okay, they open up with bombardment. They've been shelled and bombed by naval forces for 72 previous days, but the final preparatory bombardment lasted 3 days, okay, and then we're about to start the landings on Iwo Jima. All right, the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions will go in. All right, the 3rd Marine Division will be held in reserve. All right, we're talking 80,000 men in the landing force alone, okay, from 100 LSTs and 4 landing ship tanks, big LSTs, about the length of a football field, and 450 ships, okay. The first wave hits the beaches at 9 o'clock in the morning. Dead silence. They know the Japanese are there. Maybe the bombardment got them. Okay, who knows? All right, well, at 10 o'clock, it all opens up, and it's a maelstrom of fire. The problem is you can't get the tanks up the volcanic sand. They're clogging down in the sand. They suggest that men running on these beaches in this volcanic, and not like sand around here, okay, all right, but the volcanic sand around on Iwo Jima could go up to your ankles and calves, okay, sinking into it that deep, and you're lugging pounds of equipment, 60, 70 pounds of equipment. You can't move in this stuff, all right? Well, the first waves land. By the end of the day, 500 dead Marines on those beaches, all right, and also to about 2,400 casualties. Even as early as D-Day, D+2, which is the 3rd day after the assault, they'll send in the 3rd Marine Division, the reserve unit. This has become bigger than anybody ever thought. The kamikaze attacks begin. Now, they'd been started back in November of 1944. I talked about that last class, okay, but they're going to sink the Bismarck Sea, a small carrier, okay, and also damage the Saratoga, one of the big ones. All right, this is open territory. There's no jungle on this island. It's rainy and cold. It's not like the South Pacific Islands we've talked about, like Tarawa and the Marianas and also the Guadalcanal, okay? On that night of D+2, it gets even worse, okay? All right, Kurabayashi launches what he calls his prowling wolves. They're to go out and just keep Marines awake at night with no sleep, as they'll literally jump into foxholes, stabbing other Marines and things like this. What Kurabayashi does not order and forbids is the suicidal banzai charges. He says that's silly, that's senseless. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to expect every one of our Japanese soldiers to take out 10 U.S. Marines before you die. And you do not commit suicide, you die fighting. We will make this battle so bloody that and by so much time that we can continue to build the defenses of the home islands, because we know the Americans are coming, and also too we can make it so bloody that maybe the Americans will begin peace initiatives and things like that. And I'm going to talk about that more later on when we get to the preparation for the atomic bomb. This unconditional surrender doctrine has caused a problem for the Japanese High Command. All right. D-Day +4, the 5th day, in other words, that's when the flag raising takes place. I just showed you a little model I have, okay? There's controversy about that. First of all, over 1,600 men have claimed to be flag raisers. No, they weren't. There were 6 in the first unit, okay, all right? And there was 6 in the famous photographed unit, okay? There was also 2 earlier in that day, around 10 a.m., the first flag was raised. Now, this is actually a unit headed by a Captain H.G. Schreier, okay? 10 a.m. The first flag was about 4 by 2, odd-shaped flag, but it's too small for the invasion fleet, the fire support teams, okay, the ships that are offshore, the 450 of them, okay, all right, to see it, and they'll continue their firing and everything else like this, all right? A picture was taken of that, but it's got no drama to it. Now, the second picture was the one taken by as you might know, Joe Rosenthal from the Associated Press. This was a flag that was 8 feet by 4 feet, actually rescued from a warehouse on Pearl Harbor, and somebody happened to have it. Okay, it might have flown over the battleship Nevada. I'm not sure on that though. But at any rate, 4 by 8, they could see that. So they raised the second flag, and then Rosenthal takes the picture. Some of the critics have said that this was a staged flag event, flag raising, done for the papers. No. I just described why they had a second raising, okay? And those 6 Marines who were involved in that raising, okay, all right, kind of a polyglot group of representative of America itself. You had a Pima Indian there, you had an Army Navy medic there, you had farmers from the Midwest, okay, you had a guy from Connecticut, a suburban guy living in Connecticut, Rene Gagnon, all right. One of the 6 guys, if you read Flags of Our Fathers, you'll get all this. It's a great book, all right. And you got your projects coming up, great book to read, okay. You could read the second book review, rather. Okay, you could read about the story of Harlan Block, okay, misidentified, and his mother looked at that picture and said, no, that's my son. All she could see was basically his hidden face and a profile of his body. She instinctively knew that was him, and she ended up being correct. They had misidentified. I believe it was Harlan Block. All right. Ira Hayes, that Pima Indian, okay, he and a guy named Franklin Sousley drag up a 100-pound drainage pipe, and they put it up on that, and that was the second flag raising. But it was not set up, okay, it was not set up. Joel Parker, the Associated Press liaison in Guam, all right, received the picture that was taken by Rosenthal, and he said, this is the one for all time. Here's the one for all time. And let's face it, guys, that is America's iconic picture from World War II. If you've never seen the Marine Corps Monument in Washington, you know what it looks like. You got to go see it. It's amazing to sit in awe. And around the base of the statue, okay, are all the different key battles the Marine Corps has fought in. The Marines love to study their history. I'm reading Jim Mattis's memoirs right now, okay, and he says the Marines imbue the heroic history of the Marine Corps, and they all know it. I've had Marines in class, and they shake their head, yes, yeah, you got to learn your history lessons about where the Marines fought. Now, by 26th of February, the battle's still going on, about a week later now, okay, they landed on the 19th. All right, airfield number 1 is ready. The Seabees are ashore and they're actually beginning work on the airfield. And on May 4th, a crippled B-29 named Dynamite, okay, it's D-I-N-A-H, you don't have to remember the name, but might, as in the word I might be talking today, okay, Dynamite lands as the Seabees are working. In the end, okay, 2,251 planes would land on Iwo Jima, B-29s mainly. 24,761 crewmen would ultimately be saved. Now, that's about the number that are going to be casualties on Iwo Jima. So if you're one who believes that it's really not necessary, that is a wash. Equal number of casualties, equal number saved. I don't know how you deal with that, okay? Later on, we're going to put our own fighter planes there. The P-51 Mustangs will fly off from there that can assist those B-29s and escort them all the way into their raids on Tokyo, Nagata, all the Kyoto, all the different other cities. All right, it's going to take till March 26th for the island to be declared secure. Okay, all right. And frankly, the last Japanese survivor walked out of a cave in January of 1949. All right, think about that. All right, Rosenthal, in part of his reports, war correspondent, wrote, "Bullets and artillery are so thick it was trying to run through rain without getting wet." I think that's very graphic in terms of describing what happens here. 27 Medals of Honor. I know one account said 26. Okay, all right. Let's talk about a couple of names here. If you're a Giants fan, go to a Giants game up in the Meadowlands, or whatever they call it now, MetLife Stadium. Look at the Ring of Honor. You'll see a name up there called Jack Lummis. Jack Lummis was a Marine who died on Vietnam. He was also a tight end. Back when they went both ways, a defensive end and a receiving end for the New York Giants. Okay, all right. He got the Medal of Honor on Iwo Jima. One of the amazing stories, a guy named Jack Lucas, 17 years old. Okay, they were taking 17-year-olds by then. The youngest Medal of Honor winner in American history. All right. He gave up his life for his comrades, or did he? Okay, all right, a grenade lands in this rifle pit or foxhole he's in, and he throws his body on it, okay, it blows up, okay, and just basically guts him. But he's still alive. And a second grenade landed in there. He rolled over and landed on that one, smothered that one. This man lived 21 operations, and he lived. Invariably, you died from that, from one grenade, okay, but you would get the Medal of Honor, okay, the ultimate sacrifice you're making, all right? Well, at any rate, okay, 21 operations, and he survived. Nearly 100,000 men fought on this 8-square-mile island. Nearly 7,000 Americans died and 21,000 were wounded. Of the Japanese defenders, 22,000 were killed, maybe 21,000, okay? Only 1,200 survived. Most of them were wounded. Many of them were workers, Korean workers, okay? But also, too, the Marines end up taking a mere 216 prisoners. That's it. Someone once said the only casualty in the Japanese army was dead. Killed, wounded, and missing didn't count. Interesting stats here, too, as well. 195 Navy corpsmen, medical guys, okay, all right, and 15 doctors were killed in the fighting on this island. Yeah, the Japanese targeted the corpsmen. So if you were there with a big red cross sticker on your helmet, like you might have seen on MASH or something like that, okay, that's Korean War, though, don't get confused, all right, these guys were targeted. Navy took casualties from the kamikazes in the onshore bombardment, the heavy guns they had on the island, okay, almost 3,000 were casualties, 2,800, okay, and some 881 died. So this is another step on the road to Japan. I want to just mention one thing here, okay, a couple things. The island was returned to Japanese territory back in 1968. We gave it back to Japan. You and I can't go there. There's a tour that leaves from Arlington, Virginia once a year. You got to sign up for it, and they'll take you over there. But there's got to be a reason and things like this. Okay, all right. It's not a tourist trap. Even Japanese aren't allowed there unless they had a relative who fought on that island. So it's still sacred ground and well protected. All right. There was a movie, and I'm not a big fan of John Wayne movies. Growing up, I was, but now I see them as just historically made up. Okay, but Sands of Iwo Jima, one of the few battles in which John Wayne actually died. There's a couple of things that are related to the actual battle from that. For example, all right, 3 of the flag raisers. Now, in the second flag raising, the one was photographed. The one I showed you, only 3 of those guys lived. 3 of the 6, that's all. Three more died later on that island. But of the 2 flag raising groups, okay, so we're talking about maybe 15 men, okay, all right. They actually appeared in cameos in the movie. John Wayne's role of a sergeant striker, okay, he was handed a flag to be given to another guy to raise on the island, a famous scene, okay, all right. One of those, the guys that handed the flag was actually one of the flag raisers, okay. When John Wayne's hand was imprinted in the Walk of Fame in Hollywood, the sand used to make that cement came from Iwo Jima. So it's kind of interesting. I think that was one of the movies that really struck home to him, okay. Well, what's next? Iwo Jima is declared secured on the 26th. We've been already preparing this invasion. Okay, April 1st is L Day, or landing day, okay, on Okinawa. Okinawa is the last battle of World War II. All right, it'll be a staging point for the invasion of Japan. Everyone expects this. We need to have a jump-off point, okay? Plus, we need air bases and anchorages there because we got to take out those kamikaze bases on Kyushu, which is one of the Japanese home islands. Okinawa is only 350 miles away from Kyushu, easy flight range. There are 4 airstrips in Okinawa and another 2 on a small island. I'll talk about it later on. Okay, northwest of the island. Okay, all right. And Naha, the anchorage at Naha is a deep water port, so we can anchor some of our heavy naval ships there. Okinawa was also the link up between the 2 routes moving across the Pacific, okay, all right, the Southern Pacific route and the Central Pacific route, okay, they're going to link up on Okinawa. So it's a combined Army and Marines operation. 60 miles long, between 2 and 18 miles wide. It's a very irregular coastline, okay, all right, and the commander of the defender there is a guy named Matsuru Ushijima. Ushijima is the commander of the Japanese forces, about 110,000 men on Okinawa. He's going to adopt the same tactic that Kuribayashi did on Iwo Jima. Dig in, let them land, and then open up. All right. The commander of the American force is a guy named Simon Bolivar Buckner. He was actually a famous Civil War general, Simon Bolivar Buckner. Now, don't confuse you here. This is his son. All right. He actually was a Confederate general who surrendered Fort Donelson to Ulysses Grant back in February of '62. Okay. All right. The first flag raised over Shuri Castle. I just read this recently. The first flag raised to show we've taken Shuri Castle, which was the key defensive line in Okinawa, was a Confederate flag. Okay, all right. They took it down later on, put up a U.S. flag on it. All right, but it reflects this idea about Simon Bolivar Buckner. He was killed by a mortar fragment on Iwo Jima. This is the only battle we have the two main commanders killed. Ushijima commits suicide, and Bolivar Buckner dies toward the end of the battle when a fragment hits his chest and beds it, and he dies 10 days later or so. They've been preparing for Okinawa as early as October of '44. Airstrikes from Task Force 58. Okay, all right. Mitcher's task force is a total of over 1,300 airstrikes on the island. They're preparing it. Okay. Another strike occurred in March. Now, this is an interesting thing, and I have a story about this. Okay, all right. The carrier Franklin, which was an Essex-class carrier, one of the big ones. Okay, was hit by a kamikaze, actually bombs. Okay, on March 19th. All right, the fighting in Iwo Jima is still raging. Okay, but they're beginning to prepare the offshore beginning to prepare for the invasion of Okinawa. All right, my dad was in the Battle of Okinawa, and he told me the story that he was there in the task force headed the invasion fleet, bringing the 6th Marines in. All right, and he said we saw, limping back to Pearl Harbor, the battle-damaged USS Franklin. He said something to the effect like the deck plates had curled. I probably was a young kid. I don't get that. Most of the deck plates weren't plates that were made out of wood. So I don't know what exactly that is. But this thing was hit by two 550-pound bombs that crashed through the flight deck, lit fires in the hangar deck. Over 700 men were killed, and another over 1,400 wounded and missing. It steamed all the way back to Pearl Harbor. Okay, all right, 4,000 miles away, right, and made it back in. Didn't come back into service in the war, but it was one of the many carriers that were hit by the kamikazes. The kamikazes are going to do serious damage, more damage than the U.S. Navy likes to admit when it comes to Okinawa. The invasion force not only had Americans, Army and Marines, but it also had New Zealanders, Australians, okay, even a few Brits. There was even a British aircraft carrier in the attack force here. Okay, the landing force was 184,000 men, which will move up to 250,000. Okay, within days. 7 divisions, 1,300 to 1,600 ships, 40 aircraft carriers, 400 transports, one of which was my dad's vessel, the USS Gage. All right, and the manpower and firepower are actually larger than the landings at D-Day. Now, it's not total number of ships. That's the total number of men and the fire support teams. 3 battleships in Pearl Harbor were there, too, as well. Okay? All right? I have my notes here somewhere what they were. Okay? I might even dig it up a little later on here. But this is going to be the final battle. No question at all. Yeah, I have the West Virginia, the Tennessee, and the Nevada. Okay? Those are the 3 battleships in Pearl Harbor. The fire support team was directly associated with 42 ships, including 10 battleships. They're the ones, the heavy cruisers, the destroyers who could move in closer to the beaches. They're the ones that are providing the fire support for the landing teams. They land in kind of the western portion of the island, the middle of the island, the Hagushu beaches. Okay, 8-mile stretch. Okay, near the Kadena and Yantan airfields. So capture those airfields pretty quickly. All right, the first waves land at 8:30 a.m. No resistance. Cakewalk, just like it was in Iwo Jima. Veterans who knew the guys who fought in Iwo Jima saying, wait a minute, don't get excited here, okay? The 2nd Marine Division also fainted along the eastern coast where the Japanese expected them to be. So that's a reason why there wasn't a lot of heavy fire as they came ashore, okay? But by nightfall of that first day, both airfields have been taken, 60,000 men are ashore, and about 150 casualties, that's all. So it doesn't start off too difficult a process here. But hidden on this island are 70,000 Japanese dug in okay, in caves and things like this. Some of these caves have metal doors. They've learned to use them to prevent the flamethrower attacks, the corkscrew and blowtorch attacks I talked about last time, the use of napalm, etc. Well, the battle kind of begins on about, the real battle begins on about the 5th. So 5 days in, the resistance began to stiffen. On the 6th, the Japanese Navy takes its last kind of bonsai charge of its own. I referred to the last charge of the air fleet at the Battle of the Philippine Sea off in the Marianas, off Saipan. I referred to the last bonsai charge of their fleet at Leyte Gulf. Okay, well, this is what's left over. And one of the ships there is the battleship Yamato, biggest in the world, okay, sister ship to the Musashi. I talked about the Musashi last week. The Yamato will go down, hit by 400 planes on April 7th. Took 10 torpedo hits and 5 bombs. Out of 333,000 men on board, 3,055 died, went down with the ship. And on that same day, the kamikaze attacks begin. They come from the airfields of Kyushu. In total, rather than go raid by raid, okay, in total, the Japanese are going to launch 896 kamikaze attacks, coordinated kamikaze attacks, right? They're going to use 1,465 planes. Now, another source as many as 4,000. So I can't account for the difference other than to say this. There were planes specifically designed for kamikaze attacks. There were others who simply, the pilots took their own planes and crashed them into ships. That's a kamikaze, but it's not part of the kamikaze attack. All right. So they flew over 1,900 sorties. Number of ships sunk, 28. Well, another source says 33. Another one says 36. Okay. All right. We do know this, a pretty tight figure, that 26 of 28 ships, no matter how many were sunk, 33, 36, okay, were sunk by kamikazes. We're going to lose more ships here than we did at Pearl Harbor or Midway combined. So the kamikazes, guys, were effective. An average of 30 U.S. Navy personnel are dying per day. All right, 1 out of every 9 plane hits the target. Okay. Now, many of these ships, by the way, there was 268 of them damaged. Another source is 225. All right, were destroyers. They were going to go after the transports, which would have made my dad feel good. Okay, and also to the aircraft carriers. But what Mitscher did and Spruance did is they put the admirals put their picket ships, as they called them, the destroyers and destroyer escorts. Those are the first ships these rookie Japanese pilots who are going to commit suicide saw. So they want to make their mark, and they go after those ships first. Most of the casualties, okay, were taken by those picket ships, the destroyers and destroyer escorts. USS Intrepid. If you go to that ship in New York Harbor, okay, a grade A project if you wanted to go up there. Can't go now, I guess. Was heavily damaged by a kamikaze attack. In fact, you can go on the hangar deck and stand there, and there'll be a video, and the video will say, okay, if you were here, okay, on, I forget the day it was actually hit, but in April of 1945, odds are that you died when a kamikaze struck right here, right by one of the hangar elevators. All right, the USS Bunker Hill, hit by 2 kamikazes. A great book about that called Danger's Hour. Okay, it's a great book about that one. The Enterprise was hit. The battleship Missouri was hit with a kamikaze, although it was easily fixed. Even a hospital ship, the USS Comfort, was hit. Hospital ship, okay, all right? The Japanese also had suicide ships that they were going to launch, suicide boats, like torpedo boats, very flimsy, okay, but they would just crash them into the American ships, all right? You would also have Baka bombs, which are self-propelled and guided. Okay, they're missiles basically dropped from suspension by an attacking plane. Okay, all right. The Baka bombs really didn't work that well. Okay, but at any rate, they launched a bunch of them. Okay, and these are loaded with 2,600 pounds of explosives. They existed too. This is what we're going into on Okinawa. Well, the northern end of the island was secure on April 10th. Easy. They swing southward now to join the assault on the Shuri line. So if you can picture this island, I don't have a good way to describe it here. Well, let's just use this as an example, okay? The island is roughly this shape here. They've landed on the western beaches, okay? I should gesture this way. All right, part of the Marines have swung northward. They'll swing down and join the Army and the Marines heading southward. In the middle of it, like a belt across this, is the Shuri line. This is you ever see the terrain on Okinawa? Google it. It's open, it's barren. Okay, there are farms, okay, but there's no jungle here either. All right, and there's ridges and coral limestone escarpments and cliffs. Okay, all right. I'll talk more about that, but this is the defense in depth. You'll take one set of cliffs, you got another one to attack now, then another ridge line, things like that. The Shuri line had the Shuri Castle. It's the ancient capital of the Ryukyu Islands in Okinawa, and the old that goes back to I think 1200 A.D. Okay, all right, but as the fighting ensues here, one source said this: never had Pacific veterans seen Japanese artillery in such quantity. The first Japanese counterattack is April 12th and 14th. Their spirits are partly buoyed by the fact that news has come in from Washington that FDR has died. Harry Truman, okay, is now in command. It's going to make no difference in terms of the outcome of the battle, but they were buoyed by that reason. April 16th to 21, that little island known as Iyashima, okay, was also taken. Okay, northwest of Okinawa. 4-day fight. Okay. And there was a couple of airstrips there, but also too the torpedo boats, those suicide boats were anchored there. The other thing about it is this: a guy named Ernie Pyle, you might have heard about him. He was a war correspondent. Well, he's going to die on this island. He gets killed here in Okinawa in the fighting when he was by machine gun fire on April 18th. The Allies resume the offensive southward. It fails. An amphibious assault on the island, elsewhere in the island, also fails. This is a very, very tough fight. Okay. The Japanese attack on May 5th was coordinated with suicide planes and boats, a massive bonsai charge that one of the generals wanted, General Cho. Colossal blunder. He's going to lose 6,000 men. Okay, Ushijima never wanted this. Okay, but he gave it over to Cho, who was insistent. The 6th of May, Hacksaw Ridge falls. Now you saw the movie. The whole ridge didn't look like that, but part of it did. Okay, that huge escarpment. It's like 5 stories tall. Okay, all right, and that's the story of Desmond Doss, a conscientious objector who serves as an Army medic with the 1st Battalion, 370th Infantry, and he's going to save some 70 men, lowering down the cliff face. Okay, that's a true story, folks. All right, see that movie if you have it. In that infantry regiment, 307th, okay, 476 out of 800 men are going to be casualties. The Japanese are going to lose another 3,000 defending the top of that ridge. That is very graphic, so I warn you about this. If you've got little kids in the family, don't let them sit down and watch that one. They'll have nightmares. Buckner resumes the offensive on May 11th, okay? He's going into the teeth of the Shuri line now with 300. The Japanese have 317 guns and over 1,500 machine guns. One of the big attacks is on a hill called the Sugarloaf. If you take the Sugarloaf, okay, you can sweep the ridge line. That becomes important. Okay, it was finally captured after 4,000 Marines were killed. 4,000. Okay, all right, in capturing the Shuri line on May 18th and 19th. Naha falls on the 24th. Shuri Castle was taken on the 29th. Okay, all right. Final resistance basically was on June 17th. All right, that's when things end. And now begins another horror story. Forget the source on this, but just listen to this one now. The final horror occurred on Marpai Point. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Saipan. Okay, yeah, I misplaced this in my reading. Remember I told you about Saipan and Japanese civilian commit suicide? They did that in Okinawa too, at the southern end of the island. Glad I caught myself a time on that. All right. Buckner dies on the 18th. All right. The island is formally declared secure on the 21st. 22nd, Ushijima commits suicide. Another good book about this is a book called Tennyson by George Pfeiffer. Right? It's good military history. Wrote a good book on the Afghanistan war with the Russians. At any rate, an average of 2,500 people died on Okinawa, including civilian casualties. 50 to 70% of all Army and Marine casualties, U.S. casualties, came from unseen positions. They never knew what hit them. They were so heavily dug in here. 80% of the Marines on this island were under the age of 21. Right? The manpower reserves are going down. Okay, all right. Listen to this. The United States fired 7.5 million field gun shells 60,000 mortar rounds, okay, 400,000 grenades, 20,000 rockets, and shot off 30 million small arms rounds ammunition. All right, that's unbelievable. All right, by the end of the campaign, 97,800 tons of ammo had been expended on this island of Okinawa. 90% of all Japanese islands and buildings were destroyed. Okay, 7,800 Japanese and 16 ships were sunk. Okay, in the defense of Okinawa. Final totals: the American forces have lost, are you ready now? 49,000 men. All right, of that number, 12,250 were killed and missing, 36,000 wounded. The Japanese also lost 106,000 out of 110,000. Civilian casualties are very sketchy. I read 100,000, I read 200,000, I read 140,000. So I can't even tell you where to begin there. 977 POWs were taken. What is it going to be like if we have to land on the Japanese home islands? They're going to come out of the woodwork in suicidal raids and things like this. All right, the casualties will be unimaginable. They're scheduled, Operation Olympic, for November 1st, 1945. We're beginning to prepare for that now. By the spring of 1946, Operation Coronet, the landings on the Tokyo plane, the landings on the main island. We don't expect this war to be over until 1948. And the Marines and soldiers, the airmen, the servicemen were talking about the Golden Gate in 48, meaning we'll be back home in San Francisco in 48. Okay, that's how long it's going to last. Okay, that's what they expect. But it all changes, of course. Due to what? Dropping the atomic bomb. Now, I'm not going to get into the bomb drop yet, but I'm going to get into the development of the bomb to set up the class for next week. Next week, you'll be needing a new handout packet. You're done with the packet now. This is in the packet, all right? But you're done with it after I close up today, and I'll send you a new one in the mail, okay? All right? I'll get it out to you for before next Tuesday. This is technically the lecture for what, the 23rd, I think, will be this coming Tuesday. So I'll get it out for that next lecture, what, the 29th or 30th, somewhere in there. I'll get that out. I think I have a calendar with me here, what I do with it. Write on my dates here. Yeah, this is the lecture for the 21st of April, and I'll get a new handout packet for you out there for the 28th. Okay? All right. Now, in late 1930s, scientific community begins working on the atomic bomb. Leo Szilard and others begin to say, this is feasible. We split the atom, it creates a tremendous amount of energy, and we could then use this as a weapon if we have to. All right. World War II is in the offing, 1930s. You can see it coming. Okay. All right. So in May of 1942, they officially tag it called the Manhattan Project, and they begin working on the bomb. They will work at ultimate secrecy. Some will be developed at the University of Chicago, underneath the grandstands of the football field. Others will be in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Others will be at the Princeton Laboratories in New Jersey, things like this. Different areas all over the country working on different components to the bomb. The casing, the explosive mechanism, the triggering mechanism, things like this. So no hand knows what the other hand's doing, okay? It's that secret project. Fast forward now as the bomb's being developed to August of 1944, okay? All right. The magic intercepts, when we talk about the code breaking, the magic code had been broken and reveals that Japan's willing to talk about surrender here. August of 45, the Marianas have been taken. The bombing is about to start on the home islands, okay? The fighting in the Philippines is about to start. Okinawa and Iwo Jima haven't been hit yet, but the Americans are getting closer. And the Japanese may want to reopen negotiations here. The sticking point is something called unconditional surrender. What does that mean? Okay, it came out of the Civil War. It means you will surrender, no negotiation, you'll just hang it up, and then we'll talk about peace terms and agreements and arrangements after that. But you got to surrender first. Now, to a Japanese soldier, a Japanese civilian, Japanese officer, that means that, all right, we have to surrender. Then they may take our emperor, put him up on war crime trials, and shoot him. We can't have that. We're sworn to die for the emperor. So we need to clarify the position of the emperor first and foremost for willing to entertain even surrender, and the vast majority of Japanese military, particularly the army, weren't willing to surrender. The Navy was done, they knew it. By 45 anyway, as I've shown you. Now, on March 10th, 1945, another element is added into this, okay? The firebombing of Tokyo. I want to read to you a passage about that. The commander of the Air Corps in the Pacific at this point was a guy named Curtis LeMay, all right? And he was big on launching the fire raids, and I talked about them over in Europe with the fire bombings of Dresden and Cologne, things like this. Listen to this one. On March 9th, more than 300 B-29s, liberated from the harassment of Iwo's airstrips, launched the first of the great firebombing raids on Tokyo. They dropped more than 1,600 tons of incendiary bombs that destroyed 16 square miles of buildings, killed 100,000 people, wounded another 125,000, left 1.2 million homeless. The casualty figures from this and the other firebombing raids would be greater than those caused by the nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki months later, 5 months later. Now, they're lighting Japanese cities on fire. In the end, an estimated 300,000 Japanese are killed in some 60 cities that were lit up by the firebombing raids. There's a theory that what ended the war in the Pacific, and a lot of people hold to this, was the systematic destruction of the Japanese cities, not the big bombs that hit Nagasaki and Hiroshima. All right, it was basically the firebombing raids. Okay, so you can deal with that the way you want. But at any rate, April 12th, FDR died. Harry Truman, the vice president, takes over. Didn't even know about the bomb. He was informed. I can imagine that moment in that room. Mr. President, we working on this big bomb. Okay, all right. What kind of big bomb? An atomic bomb. What does that mean to anybody? Before August of 1945. What's an atomic bomb? Okay, we don't even know what it is. All right. Now, Joseph grew in May of 45, all right, fighting's raging in Okinawa now. It's actually winding down, but the Joseph Grew was had been a former American ambassador to Japan, and he said clarifying unconditional surrender is the only impediment to peace here. Harry, American president, make it this. Let's open up negotiations. Truman says no. Okay, all right. The targeting committee, the bomb hasn't been developed yet, but it's close. Begins to kind of figure out what they're going to hit. Okay, most of the Japanese cities are in utter rubble. The impact of a nuclear blast won't be other than just stirring the ashes. Okay, so they got to pick out targets that haven't hit before. Right? Hiroshima's on the list. Kyoto's on the list. Niigata's on the list. Later on, number 4 and 5 were Kokoro and Nagasaki. Okay, Kyoto is interesting. It had a very literate, highly educated, college-educated population. So one of the people on the targeting committee says, that's the one we ought to hit. Now this is sacred ground to the Japanese people. The old imperial palace was there. You study Japanese history, their original capital was there. Okay, it's rich in cultural significance, but also too, the Americans are thinking this way. Because these people in Kyoto are intelligent, their survivor accounts will be that much more vivid. Wow, it's kind of a twisted logic. But at any rate, now, July 1945. Fighting on Okinawa is done. We know what's coming next. The Japanese do too as well. Prime Minister Togo, not Tojo. Tojo is the head of the army and the head of the chief of staff of the army. Togo, okay, cabled Moscow. Now they thought Moscow was still a friend of theirs. Okay, that unconditional surrender is the only object of peace. We can negotiate through the Russians. Well, a month later, the Russians are going to declare war. That's going to end that option. July 26th, the Potsdam Declaration was issued. Now, what's the Potsdam Declaration? It was part of the Potsdam Conference. I spoke about this actually before the campus shut down in an earlier recorded lecture. All right, this is where Truman met Stalin first time. Okay, all right, and they reaffirmed the Potsdam Declaration that reaffirmed unconditional surrender. So they're going to stand by this, hell or high water. Okay, all right. Also, during that conference is when, and I told you this story, that Harry Truman, who was kind of in awe of Joseph Stalin, you and I would be too, all right, receives a telegram, baby successfully born. Why? Okay, because the atomic bomb had been dropped, not dropped, but tested from a tower in Alamogordo, New Mexico, okay? Trinity test site, okay? The bomb worked. 10 days earlier, he found out that it worked. Baby successfully born. He doesn't need Russia to come into the war now. In fact, we don't want Russia to come into the war. Because you know what Russia does? Russia takes territory, they don't give it back to the people, they take it as their own sphere of influence. They capture it as their own territory. They did it in Eastern Europe, all right, set the stage for the Cold War. They're going to do it in Far East too. Well, August 6th, 1945. Oh, I have to one more thing here. I want to talk further about this this Potsdam Declaration issue, the reaffirmation of the unconditional surrender on the 26th. The story of the Indianapolis. There's been a couple books written about this, okay? All right. One of them is In Harm's Way, Doug Stanton, great book. There's one that just came out by two authors, two female authors, historians, that wrote about the sinking of the Indianapolis. Came out just recently. It's very good. All right. The Indianapolis was a cruiser, heavy cruiser, that delivered the second bomb to Tinian, okay, in the Marianas. Well, on the 30th of July, steaming back to the Philippines, okay, it had come across out of Pearl Harbor, out of the West Coast, okay, all right, and was headed to the Philippines, okay, all right, under strict radio silence. This is a top secret weapon they dropped off, all right. A Japanese submarine, I-58, hits it with 3 torpedoes. The ship goes down in 12 minutes. 12 minutes. Of the 1,300 men, 1,200 men on board the ship, 300 are killed immediately, all right, and 800 to 900 go into the water. Now, there was a distress signal launched from the radio tower, okay, the radio room, but the radio room was heavily damaged by the torpedo hit, all right, and it wasn't supposed to be radio, but the radioman took upon himself, okay, to radio this thing under orders from Captain McVeigh. He says, no, my men we've delivered the bomb. My men are going into the water here, okay, all right. The radio message was never received, but people began to realize that the Indianapolis is late. 5 days later, they initiate a search. Now, if you ever saw the movie Jaws, Quince hated sharks. And they're sitting in the bottom of his boat. Richard Dreyfuss is there, and I forget the guy who played the sheriff. Okay, Roy somebody. But anyway, he was asked why he hates sharks. He says, because I served on the Indianapolis. When they went into the water, okay, 900 strong going into that water, all right, what we have here is less than 300 will survive. Around 300 will survive. 316 will be rescued. Many of them were eaten by sharks. That's the story of the Indianapolis. Great read, okay, great read. All right, at any rate, guys, the first bomb is dropped on August 6, 1945 over Hiroshima. It's going to cause about 80,000 immediately killed, okay? We don't know about radiation sickness and poisoning and things like this, so it might be another 100,000 that are wounded and die of radiation sickness later on, okay? August 8th, 2 days later, we haven't dropped the second bomb yet, but they declare war. Russia declares war, rather, and invades Manchuria, okay? I talk about that briefly in the Russian literature that I gave you on that one, the Russian lecture I gave too as well. That's a plane called Boxcar. The first one was the Enola Gay that dropped the first bomb. The second bomb is dropped on August 9th. I'm going to get controversial. Russian troops come pouring across the Manchurian border attacking the Kwantung Army, which is still strong, all right, on midnight on August 9th. 2 hours later, Boxcar takes off from Tinian with the second bomb. Now, can we really begin this operation that quickly? I think we can. You load the bomb, scramble the crew, and get it in the air. We want to get the Japanese to surrender so the Russians don't make further inroads into the Far East. I truly believe that the second bomb was dropped for political purposes. Yes, to end the war earlier, no question about that, okay? And it would have been dropped at some point if the Japanese hadn't surrendered, okay? All right, but dropped so quickly, I think that's what accounts for it. It's going to be not quite as damaging. About 40,000 are going to die in that one. Nagasaki was the second target, as you know. And sure enough, Hirohito accepts the Potsdam Declaration on August 10th. He radios it out to the Japanese people on August 15th and to the Americans. Okay, we must endure the unendurable. We must face the surrender. Well, he broadcast that message. There were still die-hard Japanese generals and officers who wanted to commit harakiri here, and they tried to destroy the record containing that surrender broadcast. Okay, all right. Well, that uprising will be squashed. Okay, all right. But Japan is then summoned. This date for the surrender is going to be September 1st, 1945, Tokyo Bay. Okay, all right. The battleship is going to be, are you ready for this? The USS New Jersey. They're going to sign the surrender documents on the USS New Jersey. But orders come from the Commander-in-Chief, Harry Truman. This is, no, hold up. There's another ship en route. I'd rather have that ship be the scene of the surrender document. What ship was that? The USS Missouri. What state was Harry Truman from as a congressman? The state of Missouri. All right. So politics are played even to the end. I don't really hold that against him. But yes, the bomb did shorten the war, no question at all. And the Russian advances were stopped in the middle of Korea, 38th parallel. I think I referred to that earlier. Was it the right thing to do? Next week's class, I'm going to be talking about the Holocaust. Okay, talking about dropping the atomic bomb, the arrest and treatment of the Nisei, the Japanese Americans here in the United States. And also, too, the conspiracy theory that FDR might have known about the attack on Pearl Harbor. So we got a lot of things to talk about next week, okay? But the surrender takes place on September 2nd, 1945, and World War II has come to an end. 436,000 Americans have died. See you next week. Okay, up. All right. How long was that one?
Very good. 50.